When my friend Hannah was about maybe 12 years old, something really freaky happened while she was in school. Now, to give a little background information, I was in the 7th grade, or grade 7 if you're in Canada. I couldn't go to this one camp place, which was Candelore, as the teachers thought I wasn't ready for this kind of thing. Obviously, it was BS, as I wanted to do a camping trip with the whole class, but I ended up staying behind, so I stayed home from school. But this is actually one of those stories that Hannah, honestly, I have to say, was the most freakiest one. So Hannah was with a group of friends, and when they got there on the first day, they ended up unpacking, settling in their cabins, and they were staying there from Tuesday and coming back on Friday. So one night everything went well as planned, but of course it wasn't until the next day, which was a Wednesday. Wednesday, Hannah was with her friend, which we'll call her Victoria, and her other friend Sadie. Sadie and Victoria thought that they should go exploring while the others were doing their camp thing. They were doing this scavenger hunt thing that the camp counselors have hosted, and as of this, Hannah, along with Sadie and Victoria, took off as a group after they got their scavenger hunt thing, which means they need to figure out where to go to and etc., and what stuff to find. Of course, they were told to stay in near the campground premises and not to go any too far where the teachers can't see them. But they said to them to go as far as they can and be back before dark. Now, this scavenger hunt was pretty fun, and of course it was including a lunch break in that. So as Hannah, along with Sadie and Victoria, were wandering around for the forest looking for some stuff for the scavenger hunt, they saw what seemed to be at least an old house. The house looked very old, and there was some moss growing on the roof and some vines. It looked like a very old house. Of course, they ended up seeing it in the distance, which was followed by a fence. It wasn't an electric fence or anything, but it was a barbed wire fence. But they were originally thought that they could go over there and see what's there. Maybe find if the scavenger hunt item they were looking for, which was a house, was this one. They couldn't really get over the barbed wires, so they ended up looking around. But Hannah found a pair of what seemed to be the wire cutters. She used the wire cutters and cut through the barbed wire, which she moved them out of the way without hurting them herself. Only have a few pokes and cuts from the barbed wire. They ended up heading over through the fence and into what seemed to be the part of the forest. Then they decided to realize that this might be the off-limits part of the scavenger hunt, but they thought that this might be it. When they approached the house, they ended up trying to look for a window or at least a door to climb through. But as they were looking around, Sadie looked inside and saw that there was graffiti on the wall saying "free candy." This obviously looked like it was from a crime scene, or at least it might have been a little house for someone to lure people in. Of course, Victoria said that she started to get really bad vibes and they should leave the place. Just as they looked inside, they couldn't see anybody but other than beer bottles and some cigarette butts on the ground. They even found some dry blood stains that might have been there for God knows how long. When Hannah and her friends walked out, they could see that in the forest not far was what seemed to be someone wearing a clown suit. Obviously, he was standing a couple feet away, so they couldn't really see as to what he looked like. So as they approached it, or at least the bushes where they saw it from the house after exiting it, whatever it was carrying a chainsaw and started it up. As soon as he noticed the girls, he started to chase them with a chainsaw. Hannah, along with Victoria and Sadie, ran as fast as they could, but of course, since the clown was really overweight, he couldn't really keep up with them. It wasn't long until the girls were screaming and crying when they got back to the campgrounds, and they told them about what happened. Of course, the camp counselors had been aware and called police, and the police investigated the area where Victoria, along with Sadie and Hannah, showed them where they saw the clown. They gave a good description of what the clown looked like, but as they looked in that house, and they even looked everywhere in that beyond the off-limits part of the forest, they couldn't find what that clown or the chainsaw or anything for that matter. Whatever that clown was doing there probably was trying to lure were people in there. And this story still terrifies Hannah to this very day whenever she thinks about this. This is a reason why Hannah, Sadie, and even Victoria are afraid of clowns now. So, this was one of the most creepiest and freakiest stories I've ever seen. And of course, this is actually one of them that really stands out to me the most. Now, this happened sometime in 2017, and I was still in high school at the time. As I was 19, I had to stay for 2 extra years to get my credits, as I didn't have enough credits to graduate. I was taking the forest path to get back to my house one day as I had a really rough day and didn't want to do anything too much related to teachers, and even students were being just assholes. As I walked down what seemed to be a road, I ended up looking up to see that there was a forest path that led there. One time I went there was a girl who screamed and was basically found dead. But this was different as it was near close to the winter time, so it started to get a little chilly. I took down that path and was walking down, and as I was walking down that path, I ended up realizing that there was someone or something walking behind me. I turned around thinking it might have been another student or somebody walking their dog or possibly someone taking a stroll like I was. But I couldn't see anybody, so that was actually quite weird. I ended up going through more in the forest, but I then started to see some arrows. The arrows on the trees indicated something, so I followed them, thinking that they could be a path that led to my house. As I was going down the path, however, I ended up looking over to see that there was someone or something running across the forest. Now, I couldn't really see what it was, as I thought that it might have been a hiker or maybe someone jogging. So I continued down. But as I got closer, though, to the forest more, I ended up looking over to see that there was an axe. The axe was sitting still on the tree, and it looked like it was covered in blood. I ended up taking a picture of the axe with my phone and ended up running back over the way I came and took the longer way back home. When I got to my mom and my house, I ended up showing the axe photo to my mom, and we called cops and showed them the evidence. Now, of course, they ended up going down, and they ended up couldn't find the axe as it was no longer there as I described where it was. But the police found something was really freaky. They said that they had found a few bodies of people, mainly people from high school, around maybe 14 to 18. The bodies were scattered and near a river, which of course was a ravine. But the only thing the teachers were able to notice when one of them walked down there with his dog was that there was a clown mask on the ground. So whatever it was must have been a clown and was probably murdering students. I could have been murdered if I had not got out of there sooner, but at least I took pictures as evidence of the axe. The police have no idea if this clown guy was ever caught or not, and I honestly don't know if he was caught. I honestly hope there's a special place in hell waiting for this clown person. This took place at a friend's birthday party when I was about maybe 6 or 7 years old. It's been very long time, so I obviously had remembered this came up in my mind. Now, in my hometown while I was growing up, there was younger kids who were scared of clowns. I wasn't scared of clowns, to be honest. Never really was, as I found them always to be funny. In TV shows and movies, but if you're talking about killer clowns like Pennywise, well, here's one story that kinda is similar to the Pennywise one. But not exactly as that, but you get what I mean. Now, to be honest, when I was a young kid, I ended up liking clowns a lot in TV shows. But when I was at a birthday party when I was about 6 or 7 years old, the parents of one child, which was a friend of mine that had invited me, don't really remember her name, but they did have a bouncy castle along with a clown who came here to perform at a house. Now, I was pretty young at the time, so I couldn't really remember recalling any of that. But whenever the clown appeared and asked me Hey, do you want me to make you a dog of my balloons? She asks. She seemed to be pretty nice. I know it was a girl in a clown costume, so I said sure. And she decided to go to her truck and stayed there for a while. I obviously didn't know why she was standing there for a while, but it obviously seemed that she was taking a bit. I continued bouncing on the bouncy castle for a while until we recalled that the clown was going to perform the magic tricks. Now, as we were in the living room, the clown smiled and I was her assistant in something. Now, she said, "We're going to do a magic trick. I am going to show this woman how to disappear." As the clown disappeared, I was curious as to where she was. She said in a voice, "I'm somewhere in the house. Try and find me." Me being the curious kid I was, I looked everywhere around the room and even the lower part of the place. But of course at the house I couldn't find him. The parents were basically looking with the kids, so when no one was looking, I climbed upstairs, thinking the clown was up there. As I was climbing up the stairs, I ended up looking to see that there was the clown woman. She looked like she had a knife and was standing in a bathroom, grinning like an evil one. I ended up being so scared I ran down the basement all the way down to the living room as fast as I could. I told the parents about what she did, and that's when the parents called the cops and they even escorted us to the basement where they locked the door and the clown person came down with a knife. I obviously couldn't remember what they were going on, but all I remember was there was screaming and followed by a few gunshots and people shouting police. I ended up looking over and saw that the cops had arrived and took the clown away. That's when the parents said that clown was trying to lure kids upstairs so she could murder them. Apparently this woman was in her 30s, but not only that, as a clown, she had murdered a few people and even kidnapped a few kids. Now, this honestly really scared me, knowing what this clown was trying to do. She was trying to lure me into her sick trap. I hope she gets what God knows what's coming to her. This happened in October of 2018, and it was during the time when I was working at a riding stable. This is by far the freakiest thing that's ever happened. It all started off with me mucking out stalls, taking horses in and out of pastures, etc. Around 12:30 p.m., my mom came to pick me up from work. Since I work at 8:30 a.m., I work until for the morning hours, and then I have the rest of the day off. As I got in my van with my mom, she said that she drove past the cornfield a few streets down from the barn. What she saw while on my way to get me was a clown. I asked her what the clown looked like, and she gave me a brief description of the clown. The clown looked like Pennywise from It, the 2017 remake, my mom said. I couldn't get a clear view of it, but that's what I remember what he looked like. As soon as my mom said that, I questioned her on what street that she saw the clown at, and when my mom told me that the cornfield was not far that was from a trail, I knew what she was talking about. The trail was that my mom had been talking about since it used to be a train track many years ago. But ever since the train track was removed, people used it for many purposes like hiking, dog walking, dirt biking, and etc. My mom decided that she wanted to take the trail that was by the cornfield, the one where she saw the clown. I was going to tell her that it wasn't a good idea, but she insisted that we do and take my dog there. My dog was a German Shepherd Golden Retriever mix, so he was about a few months old at the time. He wasn't really big, but he was very rambunctious, so we had to walk him pretty much every day. It was a pain to say the least, but fun too. My mom drove down the road that she took me to drive from work and riding. It was a quiet road and it never got busy. When my mom got to the cornfield where the trail was, she parked her van and me and her took the dog. We couldn't see the clown, but I wonder if he ran off to hide or something, probably waiting to scare us. So I didn't want to look for the clown. We started walking down the trail. It was surrounded by trees with leaves changing colors, which it was fall in my mom's favorite season. As we walked down the trail, we let my dog go to run to do his own thing. After a few feet away from the van, I noticed a dirt bike on the ground. Upon getting closer, I looked to see that the bike had been there for a while. Unsure about if the bike was stolen or not, I noticed some damage done to it. The tires were slashed and the chain was broken, and the bike seat was also ripped. I looked over to see if anyone was around, but couldn't see anyone. Thinking whoever left the bike there was taking a piss or something, my dog was staring at something in the wilted cornfield. I walked up to my dog and grabbed the leash just to be on the safe side. When I took a hold of the leash, I looked up to witness the cornfield. Winter was approaching within a few weeks, so it was normal to see most of the cornfield wilted in the area. I also looked over to see a figure in the cornfield. That was what my dog was looking at. My mom was a couple feet behind me, so she wasn't so far behind. I could see what the figure looked like, but the clown my mom saw earlier, but he looked to be about maybe 6 feet tall. He was medium build, and he did look like the clown my mom described it to be. I wasn't sure why he was standing in the wilted cornfield, but I had no idea what his plans were. As I stared at the clown figure, it turned around to face me, and I could see that the clown had an axe on his right hand, and that was when shit started to hit the fan. To the right of the clown, I could see at least 3 or 4 people, men dressed in black, about a few feet away from the clown. I was nearly pissing myself and wondered why those men were here. If this was private property or something, why couldn't they have just told us to leave? The clown slowly began to walk forward towards me and my dog. I almost froze in fear at that point. Suddenly, out of nowhere, there was a blood-curdling scream from somewhere in the forest. It sounded like a woman screaming, and I lost my shit right then and there, so I looked down and booked it all the way down I came with my dog, not looking back. When I caught up with my mother, I told her to run, and we did so. Despite my mom having breathing problems, we ran all the way back towards our van. As soon as we got to our van, we looked back to see if the clown was behind us, but there was no one following us. But we just didn't want to stay to find out. My mom drove down the road until we got to our hometown, looking occasionally for any vehicle that might be suspicious. When we got back, we reported the clown incident we found to the police, and they went to the location where we found the clown. Shortly after that, we headed home without any hesitation. The next day, my mom got a phone call from the police when she picked me up from work, and what they said will forever send chills down my spine. My mom told me that the clown with 3 or 4 men were luring people down the trail that we went to. They had found a few bodies of people, one of them being a 6-year-old girl. I was sickened by what the police found, knowing that those men were waiting for me and possibly my mom and a dog in the cornfield. If my dog hadn't alerted me and my mom about the clown and his men, I wouldn't be alive today. Let this be a warning. If you see anyone wearing a clown mask in the forest or cornfield, run away from it. Don't stay with the clown if you want to stay alive.